Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. A wooden rocking chair creaking on the porch, a lantern glowing softly in the night, and a mother humming an old lullaby while her baby drifts to sleep. Childhood in the 1800s and early 1900s was a world without smartphones, without plastic toys, without all the modern comforts we know today. And yet families found their own ways to raise children, some tender, some tough, and some we'd find shocking now. Today on RetroNest, we're opening that old photo album and turning back the pages to explore 10 parenting practices from the 1800s and early 1900s. Some of these customs will make you smile, some will tug at your heart, and others will remind you just how far we've come. 1. Farm childhoods, helping at home. Back then, a child wasn't just the baby of the family. They were part of the team. On American farms, as soon as children could walk and talk, they were expected to pitch in. Little boys might trail behind their father in the fields, holding tools too heavy for their tiny hands, while little girls helped their mothers stir big iron pots or fold laundry by the hearth. It was a childhood shaped by duty. Every chore wasn't just about keeping busy, it was about survival. Families needed every hand they had. What made it special was the sense of belonging. Kids weren't separate from adult life. They were right in the middle of it, learning skills for the future. But as the 1900s rolled in, new laws required schooling, and child labor restrictions grew stronger. Slowly, children left the fields and barns behind, trading them for classrooms and chalkboards. 2. Soothing syrups and secret medicines. If a baby cried endlessly in the late 1800s, parents didn't have Tylenol or modern remedies to reach for. Instead, they turned to the mysterious world of patent medicines. The most famous was Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, a sweet liquid advertised as the perfect cure for teething pains. Mothers trusted it because it worked. Babies would quiet almost instantly. But here's the chilling truth. The syrup was laced with morphine and alcohol. Parents, without knowing, were putting their infants to sleep with opium. Many little ones never woke up. At the time, people thought it was a blessing, a miracle in a bottle. It wasn't until tragedy struck too many families that the truth came out. By 1906, new laws required drug makers to label ingredients, and slowly the dangerous syrups vanished. Today, it's hard to imagine such a thing being sold openly. But it's a haunting reminder of how desperate and trusting parents once were. 3. The one-room schoolhouse. For many children of the 1800s, school didn't mean buses and big brick buildings. It meant a single wooden room at the edge of town. Inside, one teacher taught every grade at once, 6-year-olds and 13-year-olds side by side. The air smelled of chalk dust and burning wood from the stove in the corner. Kids scratched their lessons onto slate boards, erasing and reusing them day after day. What made it special was the togetherness. Older kids often helped younger ones, and learning felt like a shared adventure. Every morning, children took turns chopping wood or fetching water from the pump outside. It was school, yes, but also a community. Over time, as towns grew and governments built larger schools, the one-room schoolhouse began to disappear. But for many, it remains a cherished memory of a simpler kind of learning. 4. Mill children and early work. In America's growing cities, childhood was short. Families living near factories often needed every penny, so children went to work. Picture a boy no older than 12, his face smudged with soot, tending a roaring machine in a textile mill. Or a young girl standing on tiptoe to reach the spindles of a loom, working 12 hours a day for just a few cents. It sounds harsh now, but to families then, it was survival. Those tiny paychecks helped put food on the table and coal in the stove. What made it unique was how children were seen, not just as dependents, but as contributors to the family economy. But as the early 1900s unfolded, the nation changed course. Child labor laws and compulsory schooling took children out of the mills and put them into classrooms. Slowly, childhood became less about work and more about learning and play. 5. Polite and proper manners. Children should be seen and not heard. That saying guided many Victorian parents. The home was a place of discipline and order, and children were expected to behave like little ladies and gentlemen. At the dinner table, backs were straight, hands were folded, and respect for elders was non-negotiable. Punishments were often swift and stern, a spanking, a sharp word, or the dreaded wooden spoon. What made this practice stand out was its emphasis on formality. Parents weren't just raising kids, they were shaping proper citizens. Over the years, as psychology blossomed and parenting advice shifted, families leaned more toward understanding than punishment. Slowly, the strict rules gave way to gentler guidance, though echoes of "be polite" still live on today. 6. Nursing and wet nurses. Before formula and baby bottles, feeding an infant was a matter of life and death. Mothers breastfed when they could, but if illness or hardship struck, families sometimes hired a wet nurse, another woman who would nurse the baby as if it were her own. In wealthier homes, wet nurses might live with the family, becoming almost like second mothers. This was a practice built on trust, and it ensured that babies survived in an age without formula. It was deeply personal, and often bonds formed between nurse and child. But science moved forward. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, bottles and cow milk formulas became safer and easier to use. Slowly, the practice of wet nursing faded away, remembered as a relic of necessity from a different world. 7. Homemade toys and simple games. Children didn't always have toy stores or shelves lined with plastic. Their playthings were simple, often handmade with love. A rag doll stitched together from scraps of fabric, a carved wooden top, or a corn husk doll made during harvest time. Games like dominoes or marbles filled the evenings, while pretend tea parties were hosted with tiny tin cups. What made it special was the creativity. A toy wasn't something bought, it was something imagined. Parents and children often crafted toys together, turning ordinary objects into treasures. As factories grew and mass-produced toys flooded the market in the early 1900s, homemade toys slowly disappeared. But those simple creations hold a charm that modern plastic can never replace. 8. Children dressed as little adults. Take a look at an old family portrait from the 1800s, and you'll see something striking. Children dressed like miniature adults. Little girls wore layered dresses, ribbons, and bonnets just like their mothers. Little boys, until about the age of 5 or 6, often wore gowns or tunics that might surprise us today. It was all about presentation. Clothing reflected status and manners, and children were expected to look the part. What made it unique was how seriously families took appearances. Even a toddler might be dressed in stiff, button boots. Over time, children's fashion shifted. By the early 1900s, comfort and practicality became more important, and kids' clothes began to look more like, well, kids' clothes. 9. The heartache of child mortality. One of the hardest truths about parenting in the past was the ever-present shadow of illness. In the early 1800s, nearly half of all children didn't live to see their 5th birthday. Diseases like diphtheria, measles, and tuberculosis were constant threats, and without modern medicine, parents often lost little ones despite their best efforts. It was heartbreaking, but it also made families cherish each child even more. Parents lived with a kind of bravery we can barely imagine, pouring love into moments that could be fleeting. As science advanced, with vaccines, antibiotics, and sanitation, child mortality plummeted. Today, it's easy to forget how fragile childhood once was, but for families back then, it shaped every part of their lives. The orphan train era. In crowded cities like New York, thousands of children lived in poverty or without parents. In response, charities created something called the orphan train movement. Starting in 1854, trains carried children westward, where families in small towns and farms could adopt them. Imagine the scene. A line of children stepping off a train, their faces nervous and hopeful, while local families waited to welcome them. Over 75 years, about 200,000 children found new homes this way. It was an early form of foster care, born from both compassion and practicality. By the 1930s, the system faded as formal child welfare programs took over. The orphan trains became history, remembered as one of the most remarkable and bittersweet parenting practices of that era. And there you have it, 10 ways parents once raised their children, in a world lit by oil lamps and warmed by wood stoves. Some practices seem harsh, others tender, but all of them tell us something about the love, struggles, and ingenuity of families from long ago. If this journey through history stirred a memory or sparked your imagination, give this video a like, share it with someone who loves nostalgia, and don't forget to subscribe to RetroNest for more stories that bring the past back to life. So which parenting practice surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and until next time, keep the past alive in your heart.